Hi everyone, good afternoon. If you're coming in, it's welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you if you're coming into this session. My name is Krista Hazel, and I'm just gonna put a little task in the chat for you to just do as you're coming in. I'll probably repeat it a couple of times. But welcome, welcome, come on in. Thank you for coming. I know that this session is up against some big hitters. There's currently a GCSE session on the other side on one of the other channels. So if you're coming to this session, wonderful. And thank you for doing so. But I've just put a little task for you in the chat. I'll just drop it in for those of you coming in again. And I just want, because I thought it's always quite nice to have a little think about various different things that we're doing, and just to get our brains kind of warmed up. Though some of your brains might be quite tired now if you've been language show living for a few it is a few days now, isn't it? And a few hours. My name is Krista Hazel. I'm here to talk to you about the role of oracy in the languages classroom. And I one of the things I want you to do while we just welcome people in is just type in the chat what your favorite language word is. I'm just a nosy person, some people might say, and I love words. I love words a lot. And funnily enough, I also love speaking. So it's quite handy that I'm speaking here today. But just type in this chat what your favorite foreign language word or international language word is, because I'm just quite interested to know. Wonderful. That's beautiful Dutch word, Anthony. That's great. I've got, I always thought that my favorite French word was quincaillerie until very, very recently. And I was working with some people overseas. Thank you, Kirsten, for yours. That's a beautiful Welsh word. And they taught me poulailler, which I'd never heard before. And obviously when you play a game, you go back to the start. It's back to the chicken coop, back to the salts, and poulailler is my new favorite French word. Schwarzwälder is my favorite German word. I don't like that, a Black Forest gâteau, but I do love the word. I think it's brilliant. Well, lovely word, Sam, too. So that's fantastic. I'm going to share my screen, and I guess I'll probably get going, because if I don't get going, then, and I probably ought to share the right screen, actually. That's always a good start if I do that. So yeah, if I get going, then people can come and join us, and hopefully we can see. I'm just hoping that you can see the right screen. But yes, hopefully you can see the role of oracy. And if you can't see that, please just let me know. So one of the first things that obviously I want us to kind of talk about, if that's okay, is I've just asked you to put your favorite language word in the chat. So if you just come along, then it'd be great. Hopefully you can see the right screen, because even though I've got two screens here, you're never quite sure which one you're actually sharing, but hopefully you're seeing the right one. So that's good. And thank you to those of you that have come along. I'm quite a nosy person, I think I've said already. So if you're, it would be really lovely if you could put in the chat your favourite words. We've got some wonderful words here. And pamplemousse, brilliant. Nimmersat. And you can see it, Amy, thank you. Salam. I think it's hiraeth in Welsh, which is a beautiful word. So yes, please just type in, magnifique is a great word. Pantoufle hasn't come up yet, which for some of you is quite a good word. And I'm just always interested to see what favorite language words people, are. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm with learners, or indeed when I'm with teachers, if I was with you in the room, then I'd ask you what your favorite word is and why. And I think if we can start to find an emotional hook why we like something, then it helps us to get our learners to maybe speak about what it is. And oracy is, of course, about speaking, one of the 4 skills that, we have to do within the languages world. But ultimately, it's about communication, isn't it? And we really want our learners to be communicating. So thank you for those of you that are dropping them in. If you've got different languages, please, please, please put in different words, because it's always good to know. I don't necessarily like you sat there. You might be washing up, you might be cuddling your children, you might be, I don't know, walking the dog and listening. But if you are sat down and you are interested, as an aid memoir, it's quite a nice little challenge to do. There's an A to Z there on screen. Anything you hear or any questions you've got, just drop it into on a piece of paper. It's just an A4 piece. When I attend sessions, I write pages and pages of notes, and then in the end just go, oh my goodness me, I've got pages and pages of notes in a notebook, and I don't necessarily open it again. But if it's on an A4 piece of paper, I can take I can copy that, put it on the inside of a planner, etc., etc., and then just see it and be reminded of key things that I thought were important during that training session. Entirely up to you if you want to do it. If you tweet it or send it to me via LinkedIn afterwards, I'm sure I could rustle up a prize for really good ones. That would be great. So you may know who I am, you may not. I'm a passionate languages former teacher. I work with teachers now as a specialist leader in education for MFL. I also work with the Association for Language Learning, of which I've been a member for a very, very long time, 20 odd years or something, since I was a trainee. And I also deliver webinars for Linguoscope on a Tuesday. And I say that I'm kind of the host. So I just find great people doing great things and just shine a spotlight on their fantastic practice in the classroom or maybe beyond it. So if you're interested in anything like that, you can check out my book, because I wrote a book. It was quite good. People kind of liked it. Somebody sent me that and said they were all the useful things, Krista, that I found in your book, which is always lovely. But yes, and you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. Entirely up to you. So yes, as I said, I'm a member of the Association for Language Learning. I'm also their development manager, so I work for them a few days a week. If you are interested in becoming a member of the subject association, there's a 10% discount code there with LSL 2023, which is 10% off full membership. If you are interested, scan that code, have a look. It's run by teachers for teachers. There's an awful lot of volunteers and incredible people who do amazing things, of which Helen Myers on the other channel, currently, I think we're on at the same time. She's also a member and an incredible inspiration, like so many others. But please do get involved. So our session today is about communication and getting our young people to communicate with confidence and positivity, hopefully. And certainly during the COVID years, if you like, we saw very much a lack of that, didn't we? We were the subject, languages were the subject where when we had masks on like everybody else, it became very, very clear very quickly that actually we couldn't do lots of speaking. And even the government here in the United Kingdom decided that the GCSE for that year, that first year, 2020, and in 2021, then actually there was no speaking assessment because they didn't want to put teachers at risk, which is, you know, fine. But the problem is with that is that we sort of enabled our children to be able to speak. And I think there is a real power in understanding what oracy is, which is hopefully what this session is going to do, and identifying effective oracy in languages. Now, a lot of this isn't my work, I have to say. It is the work of Voice 21 and School 21. So if you're not already following those, it is most definitely worth looking at. But when we talk about these things, I really want to drill it down to languages. So if you can, and you might be able to, you might not be able to, I just want you to have a little think about what you understand oracy to be. And it's not a test, you know, there's no wrong answer. That's what we say to our learners. Have a go, there's no wrong answer. But in actual fact, I just want to see if indeed you know anything about it. And some of you might be oracy trained teachers with Voice 21, of which I'm not, because I'm outside of the classroom now, and they only do it for classroom practitioners. But it is absolutely worth considering that if you know what oracy is, be typing in the chat, that would be great. I think you're doing quite a bit of thinking, and thank you, Cecilia, for your wonderful hello in Zulu, which you put in the chat for us. So that's great. So I think we're still thinking maybe, so I'm going to kind of move on. There's that awkward moment when, you know, if I don't give you the answer, then you might not get there, but equally you might be typing it and kind of saying, well, hang on, Krista, it's not that easy for us to define. Well, if you, Anthony has said it's developing speaking and listening skills, and I absolutely agree. You can Google it and these are what you come up with. But I do believe it's so much more than the ability to express yourself fluently and grammatically well in speech, you know, to understand that speech too. So that listening aspect, Anthony, that you said, absolutely right. And then, but Voice 21, who are pretty much the kind of leaders in this area, really, say the ability to articulate ideas, which of course our learners want to do, develop understanding and engage with others through spoken language. And That's what we do in languages, isn't it? We want our children to speak, and we want them to speak French, German, Spanish, Italian, etc., etc. So, you know, oracy is a powerful tool for learning, really powerful tool for learning, because we teach our students to become not only effective speakers, but also effective listeners. We have to be able to hear and be an active listener, really. Some of us do that really well, some of us don't. Some of us are probably writing notes as I'm speaking, and that's fine because I gave you permission to do that. I know in some schools they want their teacher tracked, and so the children have to follow the teacher around the room and not make notes and be cognizant in what and really listening to what the teacher's saying. No judgment, just saying that that's what some people do. But really, it's about, for me, oracy is about empowering students to listen and listen well and be active listeners, but also empowering them, not some, but every single one, to find their voice and use it as a power for good in school and, of course, beyond school in life as well, because that's, you know, we're always encouraging them, aren't we, to think about the bigger picture and where languages, you know, can take them eventually. So yes. Hopefully, yes. I think that oracy is key to unlocking student potential, of course. And in the past, it's been called many different things, some of these things. And by all accounts, from what has been around and about, you would think that modern foreign languages or languages, international languages, whatever you call it within your school, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Russian, etc., all of these, you know, we never did oracy or speaking. It was only ever English departments, as if, you know, because they had a 10-minute speaking test. Well, so did we. We had to do that, and we had to do it in a room with students. So we've been doing it a long time. We know some stuff, and actually people need to give us some perhaps a little bit more credit for that. I do think that this quote here from Professor Frank Hardman is a very powerful one, of course. Talk is the most powerful tool of communication in the classroom and is fundamentally central to teaching and learning, certainly in the languages classroom. And I firmly believe that we can't do one without the other. I think the COVID years, you know, with the masks and the lack of speaking, chanting, you know, helping students find and engage with their voice, we found that really tough in our subject, really, really tough in our subject. So I think that it is absolutely fundamentally central to teaching and learning oracy, and having that voice, having that discussion too. I also love this quote from Frank Hardman, who really kind of, you know, to think through oral language. That's how we learn to think. Okay, we hear things, we think about it, we unpick it. So oracy is about advancing that individual capacity, regardless of who we are, where we live, what we look like, how seemingly clever or able, less clever, less able we are, whether we're able, you know, unable in certain subjects. We take all of them with us, all of the learners with us, regardless of that. And advancing individual capacity for productive, rational and reflective thinking. I think it's, you know, it's that harnessing the power of voice, isn't it? Those two quotes I find very exciting. So the benefit of oracy for students, then, if you don't know already, you know, one phrase that in one of the schools I used to work in, quite a challenging school, quite a challenging area, you know, we used to have to say, use your words, not your fists, because they're a little bit too responsive. And we actually didn't want our learners to do that. We wanted them to engage. And when they got frustrated, sometimes these things happen. Behaviour is not always perfect in schools. We know that. But the benefits for students are these. You know, if students can find their voice, they can use it. If they have an opinion, we teach them oracy skills, but how to use their voice as a power for good. And I've probably said that too many times already, this presentation, but I really, really powerfully believe in it. I think that it improves our student communication, how they communicate. They get less frustrated. If we teach them how to respond, how to listen, how not to react. And perhaps also, with respect, some of our colleagues could learn a thing or two by, you know, listening and not just half listening and not just responding and sending off an email or responding in a way that seems quite, you know, inappropriate in a meeting setting or such and such. And we've seen those situations. They happen with young people, they happen with adults. It's life, because we're human and we're not infallible. It also helps us develop our social and emotional skills. We can regulate better if we feel that we can express ourselves. And certainly, again, during those COVID years, we've got a lot, you know, lots of countries are saying, and the OECD and Andreas Schleicher, many of him and his colleagues are saying, well, there is this crisis where students kind of felt that they couldn't express themselves, they couldn't be who they wanted to be, and they're grieving this kind of situation of having lost quite a lot. I think the power of voice, certainly in a counselling, in a trauma situation such as that, if we can empower our learners to speak, then obviously it's a source for good. And certainly in the languages classroom, we do that anyway. It's one of our 4 skills. You know, we help them to connect with, you know, perhaps on an emotional level, a deeper understanding of themselves and also with the learning. And if they can say what they want to say, whether it's, you know, in the languages classroom or indeed outside of it, they can share that opinion and they can share it well. Benefits for society, again, if they have a voice and we give them the rules or some support or a framework, certainly, to help them with that voice, then we can most definitely, it has all of these benefits for society. Think about when things happen within communities, if we can sit down and discuss things, it doesn't always work perfectly for everybody, but, you know, we develop a better community cohesion if we can discuss things across a table. Think of restorative practice. Think of when something happens in your school. We often sit our learners down and get them to discuss it together. So actually, why can't we do something like that in the classroom too? Increase engagement with democratic society. If we have a voice, we can express an opinion. And there are some countries in the world who still, of course, don't have democracy and don't have the ability to do that. And I think if we do have a voice and we can share our opinion, then we do absolutely feel that feeling of self-worth and that we are being listened to, we can express an opinion and it's being heard rather than being lost in the crowd. Now, oracy, there's 4 strands of oracy, and I've said already, and I'll just say again, that this is not my work. This is not my research. This is very, very much the work and research of colleagues at School 21, which is a school in Stratford in London, not Stratford Shakespeare, Stratford in London, who have designed a whole curriculum around their central focus is giving children the power of their voice and really building their curriculum around the ability for students to discuss, debate, express an opinion, share. And at the end of each year, you know, well, the end of each year, part of one of their assessments, if you like, is to do a presentation. So those of you who teach outside of state schools, perhaps in independent schools, in grammar schools, and you do have debates, or indeed in sixth form where you have debates, this is what the students do. They present and then perhaps there's a debate afterwards. Really empowering, really interesting discussion here. And they say that there are 4 strands to oracy. Now, I'll be honest with you, I just taught my learners to speak. As a languages teacher, whether I've taught French, German, Spanish or Russian throughout my career, I genuinely would break down the kind of sound spelling links, as they're called now, the grapheme and phoneme links, and would really kind of drill that down so students could speak. And I'm from Yorkshire, so accents are a thing that I love, but students could speak in a non-anglicised way. They could speak and sound French, or speak and sound a bit Germanic, or speak and sound, you know, a bit like a Spanish person, because that's important. But I didn't know about these other aspects. I'll be totally honest with you. And this was a total revelation to me a few years ago. Hold my hands up and say. And I was still in the classroom when this research came out. Now, the physical, linguistic and cognitive side of things are really, really interesting. And there was one student who I taught at GCSE and A-level. It was a huge secondary school here in Bristol where I live. And this student had real stress when it came to speaking. They were they were a dual linguist. They did German and French. They did French with me and German with one of the other teachers. But both of us expressed that when this student, who actually did go on to university and do engineering and also French and German, it was quite incredible, got really stressed. And actually, in our school, we wore a school uniform, so would kind of, in those oral exams, put his hands up his jumper and kind of pummel the outside of his sweater, that level of stress that I've never seen, and then kind of grip his hands and almost kind of draw blood. It was really quite terrifying. So I kind of thought about, hang on a minute, what do I need to do to empower my students? And around this time, and I was thinking about how I can help this student. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what we did in the schools that I've worked in. I kind of looked at the physical aspects of things, because a lot of our students in year 6, year 5, year 6, year 7, volunteer, put their hands up. As soon as kind of puberty, hormonal years hit, year 8, year 9, year 10, their head goes down, they hide often behind a fringe, and they speak into their chest. Well, I'm not an actor, and I think I did drama at school as a kind of, as an aside. I didn't do it for a GCSE, and I certainly didn't do it for A-level. But one of the things that you learn within that drama study is projection and clarity of pronunciation and voice projection. Now, I'd never taught my kids that. I just didn't. I taught them how to speak, taught them how to read, sound spelling links, but I wanted them to stand up and speak. And I'm actually stood up speaking to you now. I've got one of those desks that you're allowed to stand up, and I think they're really great. It's really wonderful to get students from behind a desk, get them outside into the playground. If you're in the UK at the moment, you know, the autumnal weather is not great for that. But get them in a space where you can, so they're projecting their voices and doing it with increased clarity, so they're not mumbling. And so when we are doing any recording of any assessment for spoken work, they're not, it's not muffled, it's very, very clear, because we've taught them things like voice projection and their body language as well. You know, if they're hunched up, looking down, looking away, you can't really hear what they're saying when their hands over their mouth. And when they're kind of hiding behind, it's quite difficult. But we want them to be proud of what they want to say, even if they're saying, hello, my name is Krista. I am 50 years old and I live in Bristol. If they, you know, regardless of what they're saying, they need to say it and be stood up well, project their voice and communicate that message really clearly. That physicality I hadn't thought about, except when I'd seen quite extreme behaviour from students that actually was causing them stress and actually was impeding them from doing really well. The linguistic aspect, I think we always do as language teachers. I really think we do. The cognitive aspect too, I think we do. We ask students to structure what they want to say. They don't know exactly what questions we're going to ask them, exactly which picture card's going to come up. Of course they don't in assessments, because you know, it's just totally random. But we do encourage them to be aware of and be mindful of and kind of think about these things. And those are really important aspects of oracy. And obviously when they give an opinion, to express a reason and support that, you know, give us some more interesting details. And then that kind of social emotional side of things there, you know, listening and responding, look at someone, listen to them, make notes, but then look, nod, smile, even if you're like scowling at somebody, it's not that great. And certainly be aware of your audience as well. So when we are doing those oral assessments at the end of, I don't know, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5, how often, you know, we talk about walking, talking mocks a lot in the United Kingdom, but how often do we sit them in that room and go through that process with them, really break it down, and knowing that it's just you as their teacher and then with the you know, them and the microphone in between you? It's quite a sort of stress, is a source of stress for them. And if you talk to them about it, would be quite interesting. But, you know, these things, if we start building these things in, I promise you, because I've done this and I work with some of the schools in my SLE work on this, students can make huge gains without stopping what we're doing within the curriculum, because we don't have vast amounts of time. I know that every school and every curriculum is different. Every educational setting in each country is different too. So if you have lots of time, great. If you have an assistant, those wonderful, wonderful humans who come into schools and help us, they're younger and cooler than perhaps as teachers, but you know, they are also great, and share this with them as well and make sure that you kind of understand this so you can help them become better orators, if you like, better speakers. Now, I know there's some comments coming up in the chat, but just very quickly, do you teach all 4 strands? Did you teach all 4 strands? I've already put my hand up and said, you know, you are, I just didn't. I didn't think about the social and emotional side of things. I didn't think about that physicality and performance. And I know that Chris has said, you know, giving my presentation standing up means I can move my arms around more. Well, as teachers, we kind of love to do it, don't we? you know, Anna, you're not the only one, and not everybody does teach all 4 of those things. And like I say, the School 21 and the Voice 21 program is free to be a part of, and follow them on social media. They are incredible and are doing incredible work. I'm hoping this is going to be an MFL strand really, really soon, because obviously we've been doing this for quite a long time, but there are aspects that we can take from their research, their incredible work, and just then kind of really develop the confidence for our learners. Remember, it's obviously not the product, it's the process. And if we focus on the process of them speaking and becoming more confident speakers and orators, we teach them graphemes and phonemes. So they've got, you know, they can see the words, they know how to say it, and they feel confident in doing that. Then they can decode text and they can understand things, not just when they are listening to it and when someone else is speaking or when they're speaking, but also when they read it. All of these skills are linked, aren't they? And if you can hear it, you can speak it, you can read it through those grapheme phoning, those sound spelling links, then also when it comes to writing, then they've got a better chance of perhaps getting something down that's maybe a little bit better. You may disagree with me, that's, you know, and that's entirely up to you. But, you know, if you've got any questions or comments, if you want to put them in the Q&A, then absolutely, please do. Anthony's just put in the chat that he really likes to develop intonation and expression in a different language. It makes it fun and engaging. Absolutely, absolutely. And I grew up with a brother who lost his hearing in one side and spoke in a very monotonous way, because he'd lost hearing in one of his ears. And he also we also have a Yorkshire accent, so he found it especially difficult, and people thought it was very, very monotonous and not so great. So his German teacher many years ago taught him that element of intonation and things, and it was just so wonderful for him, because he sort of came alive, really, because he knew there were certain words he had to say a certain way, and he couldn't necessarily hear that, but his teacher really spent some time with him and doing it, which was amazing, and really a really inspirational teacher in like the 1990s, the early 1990s, just really wonderful. But it brought that alive. And if we just think about, you know, the intonation, you know, if you're bored saying it or delivering it, what do you think that listener's gonna think? You know, are they going to enjoy it, or are they going to be like, this is not very interesting? Anyway, so in your classroom, just a few super quick things to consider when we're thinking about oracy, and certainly when we're thinking about speaking. And you may think, oh, Krista, we know this, I've been teaching for however long, but do you do this? Set ground rules for speaking, where you deliver this to them and say, right, you're going to respect the speaker, you're going to listen to them. If you're in pairs, if you're in threes, if you're in fours, if someone's speaking, you're not speaking over them. If someone's, you know, you are listening, because you are going to give them feedback. Is there anything good you want to say? Is there anything you want to add, build, or challenge? That A, B, C, add, build, or challenge. Or you could say interrogate. And if you've got more able learners or older learners, they might want to say, well, actually, I'm not sure that you said that correctly, or perhaps you could have, no, I want to question this a little bit more, almost like a debate. But like I say, that's for older learners. But by doing this and setting the ground rules, is, you know, we don't laugh at people when they make a mistake. We don't laugh if someone stutters. You know, my brother grew up in his later teenage years being deaf in one ear. I grew up with a nervous stammer, because I was really nervous about speaking aloud. I think possibly just because I'd been laughed at in the past or something, I couldn't say something, but I just developed this nervousness. So yes, Miriam has said, could I clarify what ABC is? So if you're listening to somebody and they're delivering something, something that they've prepared, maybe something part of a role play, or you've asked them a question, you know, you're listening to their answer. Add, ABC is add, build, or challenge. So something that you've heard and said, do you want to add something to that? Do you want to add a further comment? Do you want to build upon it? Do you want to challenge what's been said and say, oh, well, actually, you've got your nu and pa in the wrong order. You know, actually, your word order, because you had a vowel clause, is not quite right. You know, your pronunciation of this is, you know, it should be this instead of this. Is a really lovely way. And the I is interrogate. So add, build, challenge, and I is in interrogate. So you really want to unpick it a bit more. So you could ask questions about what they've said. So if, for example, you've asked them a question about where they live, why do you like living there if they haven't given you a reason? Where would you prefer to live? That's that kind of interrogation. And I know in the world within which we live now, we might not want to use that word so much because it's quite challenging times, but it's quite nice for students to just really kind of drill in. So add, build, challenge, and interrogate, or just extrapolate. That's absolutely fine. And obviously prove you're listening too. Make sure that we are encouraging our learners to prove that they're listening, making notes. They don't necessarily have to track, make notes so they can give some feedback, because we want to develop good listeners. So if we are developing good orators, those that are confident or increasing in confidence with oracy, then we need to make sure that they also become good listeners. So they're good at listening, give eye contact, respect the speaker, respond if a question's asked, or certainly, give feedback. I really like the fact that you said this. I wonder if it would be better if you'd added a different tense, or perhaps added a reason to your opinion, or given some extra detail. Small things like that, just so someone's not speaking and people are just going, oh yeah, that's great because you're my friend and I really like what you're saying. Actually, they're really starting to unpick the language a little bit more. And if you have mnemonics in your class, palm, or we had caught and courted and tailored. So caught was in anything you say or write, you had to have a connective opinion, reason, time frame, time indicator, and then moving that ed for extra detail. And kind of as they got older, then we'd want them with tailored. So they'd have tenses or time frames, adjectives, intensifiers, linking words. So again, connectives, opinions, reasons, and ed, extra details. That's what we wanted to do, but we didn't start with that in Key Stage 3, and when I worked in Key Stage 2 we didn't start with that either, but we just wanted to make sure that learners could feed back in a way, and the parameters that we used as teachers they were also able to use, so they could really be quite critical as a critical friend and support their friends and one another. And obviously rules for good oration, look at the audience. If you're speaking, remember it's that physicality, stand up, look at your audience. I'm currently looking at the green dot, you're possibly looking back at me, or certainly at the slides. There's things going on. Make sure there's no obstructions, we're not hiding behind anything, we're not fiddling or looking at or doing anything that could be done, because this is what a lot of our learners do, isn't it? Sometimes when they're nervous, when they're anxious, it is part of the performance. It really is part of the performance. No looking down, and we focus on things like praising pace, clarity, pronunciation, intonation, stand tall and breathe. I'm not a drama teacher, but I just want my children to be able to speak with confidence. I know that they can do it with their friends and they do it outside, because we see them in the playground, out when they're out and about in the town and cities, they're different people. But when it comes to languages, we don't want them to be nervous, because they've got the skills to be able to speak. So do we teach decoding? Do we teach them phonics? And if you're interested, there's a wonderful series of, I think it's Planète Phonétique and Planetas Fonéticas by Wendy Adeniji and Juliet Park, iLanguages. If you're based in the UK, NSELT did some phonics resources, and they're now called LDP, but they're available for free. You might have your own things, but if you don't teach them how to decode, how to say things and how you're going to do it, there's a school with these children here, and it's a school in South Yorkshire called Springwell, and these children have social and emotional issues, but the school teaches them through something called active phonics, which they do in English, but you can see the letters of the alphabet, and they had the sounds on the floor. They would kind of do a bit of a hopscotch game, stand on top of the sound, say it, and then shoot a hoop. Very simple, but you know what? Those children who were really struggling to read and to access text could absolutely do it. And this is one of the fun ways that they learn to do it. A colleague here in the Southwest called Nina Elliott, amazing, does something called the hip hop phonics. You can find it on YouTube, brilliant. And obviously tongue twisters are always really good, in sound training. A lot of children are withdrawn from English lessons to do sound training in English to really help them engage with the sound spelling links in English and to improve their level of English. But that for languages will be amazing. So if anybody's feeling inspired, then definitely do that. So speaking mats, if we're providing scaffolding, all of these things here, they're not new. That we've been doing them for many years, but use these not just for writing, obviously not just for, you know, exam time. Have them all out there all the time. Not all of them all of the time. Be judicious. But, you know, use them as a scaffold to help learners be able to, well, to empower them and provide support for them, because we expect the most out of them. We set our assessment, our lesson up, our task up, but we don't want them to just go off and do it blindly. We want to give them a structure. And by doing that, whether it's a substitution table, I think now these are often known as sentence builders these days, or those trapdoor activities where you select parallel text. You know, if we show and model, offer these supports and then model it as well, then students can certainly access what's going on here. And hopefully the language that we use, or that we are expecting our learners to use, is appropriate, you know, and the texts that we're using so students can see. I know this is about oracy, but certainly the written text that we use to read, then students can absolutely access those. There's research to say you need to know between 50 and 80% of the language within a text in order for students to be able to access it. So if you're taking authentic texts from websites and things, wonderful, but just be mindful of the level of appropriate language in there, because some students might not get it because it's just too high level. We obviously want to give them a challenge, but we want to make sure that they can do it. If we are obviously doing oracy activities, speaking activities as we should be, then we need to make sure we practice, space and repeat. Now, how do we show progression? And I'm acutely aware that I'm zipping through this really quickly, so apologies, folks. But obviously, we need to show progression in languages. How can we show if we're focusing on developing great orators? What's the proof? Where's the baseline? How can we track and monitor it? And certainly, you know, you possibly can't see it here, so I will send it out to you. But again, this is not mine. This is Voice 21's, and they're looking at, you know, the 4 aspects, those 4 strands, so the physical, linguistic, cognitive and social and emotional aspects, but also then looking at apprentice level, developing level, confident level and expert level. So in terms of physicality, you know, expert level is I can control my voice and body with fluency and precision. Now, I never taught my children how to do that, but you know what, when I did, some of them would choose to stand up and do their speaking assessment, but they wouldn't be fiddling, they wouldn't be looking at the floor, they wouldn't be tapping, they wouldn't be shaking, because it became part of the performance. And I use this, and we can develop this. You can develop it to your classroom, your learners, to make sure that we are upskilling our learners. And actually, we've got a progression grid, if you like. And this isn't another form of assessment. You might think it is. It's up to you to use it. You don't have to use it. But when it's there, we can certainly be looking. I think you can use it teacher assessment, you can use it self-assessment. Everybody's going to say, oh, well, I'm an apprentice, and you know, for physical or linguistic, it says I can, well, the first line of linguistic for apprentices, I can use limited vocabulary well. Well, some students might say, oh, I can't, I don't know if I can, you know, I just don't know if I can. We need to build up their confidence. So I think we need to use it as an assessment. Also be thinking about when we show videos and things like that, listening tasks, you know, how could they, what level might this be? Then at least they know it, and then we can get them to assess themselves and one another, which of course is always the dream. So strategies for your classroom, then please make sure you do these things. If we want to look at oracy, please set the ground rules, model good oracy. Don't be setting up your computer doing all these things, probably doing what I'm doing now, speaking too quickly. Set high expectations, scaffold students' oracy, make sure they know what's expected of them, how to get there, use those mnemonics, use those sound spelling tools so they can decode sounds, decode the words, and actually speak with a degree of confidence in the target language. Get them to fall in love with drama. And, you know, practice turn taking as well, which is something that they don't do when they're talking to their mates. They often talk over each other, and it's quite fake to do. But when they're very little, our primary colleagues do incredible work with turn taking, and it's quite a good thing to do for ours. Also, plan for oracy, like we plan for speaking, plan for questions. make sure that all of them speak. So this wonderful NQT, who is now a head of department that I want to work with, she's incredible. She had the idea of just, we had lots of drama items in our department. One wears a beret or a sombrero. They have a clipboard with a name, and every time a student speaks, they just put a little tally next to their name. And then at the end of the lesson, they'd give that back to the teacher, so the teacher would know that, Krista, you haven't spoken this lesson. Next lesson, I'm going to be making sure that you speak. When we obviously are giving feedback, it's kind of specific and helpful. And everyone tries to extend their answers or betters by that add, build, or challenge. We try to add something. If you want also things to do, if you want to add a little bit of flair, sock puppet. Students love sock puppets. We did a task once, again, an incredible, she was actually a teaching assistant, a trained teacher, but she was a teaching assistant who then became a teacher in our school, had this brilliant idea for Enrichment Day of developing sock puppets. And then we did puppet theatre, sock puppet theatre, to encourage students not to speak, but actually to speak with a sock puppet, and loads of them. I saw some like a couple of years ago, just before COVID, and they're like, oh, miss, I've still got my sock puppet, I've had to get some glue, and oh, do you remember when we did that? Like, it was crazy. I think we went to Asda or somewhere and bought loads of, you know, socks and loads of kind of googly eyes and stuff to put on, and it wasn't very expensive, but 180 children, you know, when we did it for a few years, loved it, but it really encouraged their speaking. So I've even had children in an exam sat there talking, but with a sock puppet on. If you've got a fancy dress box like some of our learners here, quite reticent learners and speakers, some of them maybe, just get them to put their a sombrero on, get them to put, you know, big googly glasses on. It just helps them to develop their confidence and skills, perhaps. Also, a little theatre show. If you've got a sock puppet, get them to come and do. I have to say, if they're a teacher or something, yeah, someone said, comfort animals. Yeah, absolutely. Comfort animals. If you allow kind of dogs in school and things, you can definitely have those. You don't want lots and lots of cats. But yeah, there might be something. There are some students who started bringing in headscarves and things from home, just so they could develop and plan. But they'd be like, Miss, are we using the dress-up box today? And really, it became I'm really excited for speaking because I can dress up and I'm a different person. It's part of a performance. And we kind of do that as well, I think, as teachers and as practitioners. We got them to bring their own, some of their things in. It did get a bit ridiculous, and there is a picture of me circulating somewhere of me. Somebody brought a onesie in, a rather group of cheeky secondary age boys brought in a onesie of Scooby-Doo for me to wear, and they made comments during a fashion show event that we were doing as part of enrichment, and it was hilarious. I might tweet it later just as a reminder, I might not, we'll see. There is a comedian called Jack Whitehall, and he always talks about a boy called Atticus Loy, somebody called Atticus Loy. He's got a hook and he's got a story. And if you channel your inner Jack, find your hook, find your story. And if you listen to the presentation by Liam Printer and the work that he does in his podcast, Motivated Classroom, they develop stories around characters if students don't necessarily have lived or real experiences. That for students, they pick up a theme, channel your inner Jack, you're allowed to talk, you're allowed to pick about someone else and talk about it, so it's not necessarily about them, which is quite nice. Obviously, ICT, make sure that you use this as a power for good, but please be mindful of safeguarding. Joe Dale is incredible. There are lots. There's Jérôme Nog too, who are amazing. Esmeralda Salgado, absolutely brilliant in terms of IT. Reach out to them or follow them to see how they use IT. I know Esmeralda's been experimenting with TikToks in her classroom. Amazing, just to really make it really exciting. But those three are people who are known within the community, who are absolutely brilliant at IT, but will also tell you what works, cut through the kind of silliness and whatever, tell you if it works in UK schools or in your school, but also are very clued up on the safeguarding aspects. They are brilliant. Whisperoo on the other slide is a bit like Chinese whispers. Sorry, Carmen's just said, what is this? It's a bit like Chinese whispers. So you get students to say something and pass it around the room. It used to be called Chinese whispers when I was a little girl. We don't call it things like that now. So we called it Whisperoo. So you whisper. around the room, and then we see what comes back. It's really good fun. A little bit of fun. Get them to develop a longest sentence. How long can their sentence be? 2 truths, 1 lie. If we'd have had time, I would have played it with you. Get them to do while talking in a lesson, no writing. To get them to just practice speaking. Games like Taboo and Pictionary, role play cards, always good fun to do. And ultimately, if we're thinking about questioning, then we've got hot seating. Get them, ask them a question, get them to plan a 30-second response or a minute response and time them and get them to do that together. Pose, pause, pounce. Bounce is a brilliant strategy, or build up using John Sayers. Deeper questioning methodology is also brilliant. And if you give students an answer, what might the question be? You're getting them to think about questions. There's talking chips, and if you've ever heard of Kagan, brilliant strategies, really brilliant strategies for speaking. Their books are very expensive. Their training courses are even more expensive, but really brilliant. I would urge you to have a look. I've got quite an old blog now where I talk about talking chips and inside outside. Have a little look at that if you want to. Talking dice, verb dice, brain box, game, happy families, or modern families. We need to have a look at those maybe. They're really interesting ways to get props into the classroom, but things that don't cost a vast amount of money. And talking dice are so brilliant, but again, those are probably for older learners. The reason why, and I know I need to finish now and let you move on to other sessions, but thank you so much for coming. But it's about shaping learners of all kinds, and some are not like me that speak a lot. Some really struggle to speak. So it's about thinking about what we can do, not throwing about everything. It's about small changes making a big difference in classrooms. So thank you so very much for listening to me rattle on and, you know, really go speedily through this. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to stay on, but I know that there are other sessions on. But do check out the work of School 21, Voice 21. Do reach out to Joe Dale, Esmeralda Salgado, and also Jérôme Nogues too, because their knowledge of IT is far superior to mine, but they will definitely help you with any questions that they've got too. But thank you so very much. It's just been wonderful to have you. I will stop sharing my screen now in the hope that if there are any questions or are any of you that have listened to this session, you might be interested. But follow me on Twitter, or X, I think it's called now, isn't it? On Twitter and social media, and just kind of ask me any questions you've got. I think I was quite a nervous child. I was somebody who didn't want to speak amazingly, partly because of that nervous stammer. I know my brother was too, but you know, he's still quite quiet. I'm less so now. But do just think about the learners in front of you, and it's about doing what we can to maximise that. But thank you so very much for coming and listening today. Thank you for staying, those of you that have, and please head off to your next session if you want to. It's been an absolute joy, and hopefully I'll connect with some of you on social media. And if you've got any questions about getting children, young children, older children speaking in the languages classroom, we can definitely help you with that if you want to help out. Well, if you want to reach out. Take care, everyone. Bye. Thank you.